Soviet engineers and American programmers working side by side. Images that would be impossible anywhere else in the Cold War. May 15, 1982. Somewhere west of Nevada, 20-year-old junior engineer Viktor Petrov presses his face against the train window. He has been traveling for 3 days since leaving the detention center in New York. 3 days watching America roll past. 3 days trying to understand what he is seeing. The train slows at another dusty station, San Jose, California. On the platform, a man in jeans and a concert shirt watches the train. A real Silicon Valley programmer, not a propaganda poster, not a movie character, an actual American tech worker sipping coffee, squinting in the California sun. Petrov and 499 other Soviet computer engineers are about to enter a world that Pravda insisted did not exist. They were Technical Institute graduates mostly, captured during covert operations in West Germany, East Berlin, Prague. Men who had worked in classified Soviet computing facilities. Men who had expected to die in interrogation rooms. Different outcome. The Soviet propaganda machine had told them exactly what to expect from American captivity. Barbarism, exploitation. The uncultured capitalists of the West would treat them like slaves. After all, Americans were soft, decadent, cowboys and criminals, a nation obsessed with profit without culture or honor. The first shock had come on the transport planes. Real coffee, actual meat, 3 hot meals a day, more food than Soviet engineers had seen in months, the same rations American personnel received as required by international agreements. Now, as the train carries them deeper into California, the contradictions multiply. Through the windows, they see endless suburbs, office parks that stretch to the horizon, electronics factories humming with activity, towns with bright signs, paved highways, automobiles everywhere. One engineer will later write to his family, "The Americans have so much of everything they even share it with their enemies." Facility Sunnyvale, California, 30 miles south of San Francisco, built for 4,800 detainees. Reality, a small American tech campus dropped in the middle of computer country. The buses from the train station drive through the main gate. The Soviets expect machine gun towers, attack dogs, brutal guards. Instead, they find dormitories with electricity and indoor plumbing, hot showers, flush toilets, things many of them did not have in Moscow. The facility administrator addresses them through a translator. The rules are simple. Work 8 hours a day. Follow regulations. Cause no trouble. In return, 3 substantial meals daily. Wages of 80 cents per hour in facility credit. Cafeteria privileges. Recreation. Mail from home. Junior engineer Dmitry Volkov cannot process what he is hearing. They're going to pay detainees the same rate American junior programmers earn, approximately $50 a month. The next morning, they meet their work supervisors, not soldiers, company founders, senior programmers, project managers, men in casual clothes and sneakers, men who need hands for their projects. The American technology system is building half the free world's computing infrastructure, but American engineers are spread thin across defense contracts, preparing for the next generation. Silicon Valley code bases stretch for thousands of lines. Without workers, projects will fall behind schedule. The Soviets are the answer to every company's staffing prayer. A founder named Michael Chun looks over the group of detainees. He needs 40 engineers for his software division. He points at the most experienced Soviets. Then he does something that stops everyone cold. He walks over, extends his hand, and introduces himself. In California, he explains through a translator. Colleagues shake hands before working together. Senior engineer Sergei Volkov stares at the extended hand. 6 months ago, he was working on classified Soviet systems. Now, an American wants to shake his hand like an equal. He takes it. Chin's grip is firm, calloused from typing, a working engineer's hand. The office floors of Santa Clara County stretch for acres under the California sun. The work is demanding. Long coding sessions, debugging problems, 40-hour weeks. But something extraordinary happens in those offices. The Soviet detainees work alongside American programmers, Asian immigrant engineers, European contractors. The ideological hierarchy the party preached crumbles under the fluorescent lights. Everyone troubleshoots the same. Everyone's eyes strain the same. Everyone drinks from the same coffee pot. At noon, Linda Martinez, the cafeteria manager, rings the lunch bell. The detainees expect bread and water. Instead, sandwiches, salad bar, soda, cookies, pizza on Fridays. Linda does not speak Russian. The detainees do not speak Spanish, but she adds extra portions onto their trays and smiles. Food is a universal language. Viktor Petrov will remember this meal for the rest of his life. Not because of the food, because an American woman treats Soviet detainees with the same kindness she shows everyone else. The Soviet system said this was impossible. The Soviet system was wrong. Saturday night, facility Sunnyvale, the recreation hall fills with music, not military marches, not patriotic anthems, rock and roll on the radio. Western pop, the sound of America in 1982. After some Eastern European detainees gained more freedoms following diplomatic agreements, they could attend local events, chaperoned and supervised. Soviet detainees watched with envy. Some facilities later allowed carefully monitored social activities. Always supervised, always controlled, but still a slice of normalcy in Cold War tensions. The detainees form bands, learn American songs, some write new ones. A strange fusion of Russian folk melodies and Western rock music that exists nowhere else in the world. The letters home create their own crisis. What can they write? In 1982, Sunday morning within the facilities, Soviet detainees hold their own religious services. Orthodox priests among the detainees lead worship. The American military provides prayer books, religious materials, freedom of religion, even for enemies. Some facilities arrange special permits for detainees to attend local churches on holidays. Christmas 1983. A handful of Soviet engineers sit in the back pews of an American church. The hymn is a traditional carol originally sung in Russian. They know every word. By the third verse, some are crying, not from sadness from the shock of being treated as human beings in an enemy land. December 23, 1983. Facility Mountain View, California. 25 submarine electronic specialists have been planning for 3 months. Their escape route stretches through the Bay Area transit system to Mexico. Tonight they break out. The plan is brilliant in its stupidity. Take public transportation to the border, cross into Mexico, live free until the Soviet Union prevails in the Cold War. They have studied transit maps, saved meal vouchers, prepared documents. Everything is ready. Captain Pavel Kuznetsov leads the way. They emerge in the California suburbs under a full moon. Freedom. They run toward the bus station and stop. No buses run at midnight on holidays. The schedules were outdated. Before budget cuts, before route changes. Their plan is dead. They scatter into the suburbs. Within hours, they are lost. The California winter nights are cold and disorienting. They have no local currency, no real contacts, no idea where they are. Junior engineer Anton Fedorov stumbles into a gas station near San Jose. He has been free for 3 days. He is exhausted, confused, desperate. The attendant, an old man named Pete, gives him coffee, makes him a sandwich, then calls the authorities. While they wait, Pete shares his coffee, tells Fedorov about his own son in the Navy, 2 father sons, one lost in the suburbs, one lost in service. Captain Yuri Sokolov makes it furthest all the way to downtown San Francisco. He is sitting in Union Square on January 28th when a street vendor notices his accent. The police find him exhausted, homesick, ready to return. Even escaped, America is still America. Abundant, comfortable, impossible to hate. Spring 1984. The Cold War tensions are shifting. In the facilities, the mood changes. Letters from home stop coming. Economic reports are grim. Families are struggling or unreachable. What does there go back to? Michael Chun makes an offer to his Soviet engineers. He wishes they could stay, work the company. He would sponsor them if he could. The pay would be good. $100 a week plus benefits. More than they would make in the Soviet Union if the economy still functioned. But international agreements are clear. Detainees must be repatriated. No exceptions. They must go home. But home to what? Economic collapse, political suspicion, technological backwardness. Company founders across California write to their congressman. These are not just detainees anymore. They are colleagues, friends, the best programmers they have ever had. But the law is the law. May 8, 1985, diplomatic agreements finalize. The Soviet Union accepts terms. In facility Sunnyvale, the detainees listen to the radio in silence. Their country is crumbling. The system that was supposed to triumph is failing. Everything they believed is ash. But something else has been born in these facilities, at these companies, in these churches. Understanding, friendship, a different future than anyone imagined. That night, Michael Chun brings a bottle of wine to the facility. Good California wine, local vintage. He shares it with Sergei Volkov and the Soviets who have worked his projects. They drink to the end of tensions, to the lost on all sides, to whatever comes next. Volkov tells him, through an interpreter who is no longer needed, that he wants to come back when he can, if he can. America has shown him something the Soviet Union never did. That strength does not require cruelty. That power does not demand control. That enemies can become friends over code reviews and project deadlines. The repatriation begins in 1985. Trains reverse their journey east to the ports, ships to Europe, back to a struggling nation. But the Soviets carry something with them. Knowledge, not military secrets, something more powerful. They know how Americans work, how they organize, how they innovate. They have seen American abundance and understand it is not magic. It is methods, technology, management, things that can be learned, copied, adapted. More importantly, they know Americans, not the propaganda caricatures. Real Americans. Michael Chun teaching them to code. Linda Martinez ladling extra portions. Pete giving coffee to an escaped detainee. When they tell these stories back home, no one believes them. Americans treating detainees better than the Soviet system treated its own engineers. Impossible. Paying them wages, teaching them skills, sharing their worship spaces, fantasy. But the evidence is overwhelming. 5,000 Soviet technical personnel worked American tech companies from 1982 to 1985. They completed millions of lines of code, debugged countless systems, saved entire projects that would have failed. The American technological miracle that powered the information revolution. Soviet detainees helped make it possible. By 1989, something remarkable happens. Immigration laws change. Former detainees can return. $5,000. They board planes in Moscow and Leningrad. Not as detainees this time, as immigrants, seeking the America they found in captivity. A former submarine electronics specialist returns to California in 1990. Michael Chun is waiting at the airport. Same handshake, stronger grip. No translator needed now. His English is perfect, California accented. He sounds like a tech worker. He marries a local woman, opens a consulting firm, designs computer systems and network infrastructure. His son will go to Stanford, study computer science. His grandson will serve in Iraq, U.S. Army, 101st Airborne. The transformation is complete. Another returns to Silicon Valley. A project manager has work waiting for him. The best programmer he ever trained. Eventually, this man starts his own software company, 50 employees near Palo Alto, develops business applications, wins industry awards. His neighbors know his story. They do not care. In California, you are judged by how you code, not where you are from. Even one of the Mountain View escapees returns legally, opens a small business in San Jose, not far from where he was captured. The irony is not lost on anyone. Decades later, former detainees return to visit the facilities. They bring photo albums. Young men in plain clothes, learning to debug programs, learning to design systems, learning that their enemies were human. At one reunion, an elderly founder stands to speak. His voice is weaker, but his message is clear. You people came here as enemies. You left as friends. You came back as family. That is the American way. That is the Silicon Valley way. That is the human way. The applause goes on for 5 minutes. former enemies embracing. Not a dry eye in the room. The numbers tell one story. 5,000 Soviet technical personnel, 15 facilities across 8 states, millions of dollars in technology labor, 800 eventually returning as immigrants. But the real story is not in the statistics. It is in the transformations. Soviet engineers becoming California tech workers, enemies becoming neighbors, ideology dissolved by collaboration, propaganda shattered by simple human kindness. The Soviets expected American exploitation. They found American abundance, not just material abundance, abundance of spirit, the confidence of a nation so secure it could afford to be generous to its enemies, so strong it could show mercy. In his final letter from Facility Sunnyvale, one detainee wrote to his mother, "The Americans are capitalists, just like Pravda said, but they never told us capitalists could be kind. They never told us they would share their food, their skills, their humanity. They never told us they would teach us to write software and repair computers. They never told us they would shake our hands. They never told us the truth about anything. The truth was simpler and more profound than any propaganda." In Silicon Valley, Soviet detainees discovered something that transcended nationality, ideology, and Cold War tensions. They discovered that enemies are just strangers you have not worked beside yet. That hatred cannot survive a project deadline. That humanity is stronger than any uniform. They came as warriors of the Soviet system. They left as programmers. And in the office parks of California, the server rooms of Sunnyvale, the conference halls of San Jose, they learned the most dangerous lesson possible for a totalitarian ideology. They learned that their enemies were human and that they were too. The detainees formed communities within facilities. They shared what little personal items they had. They taught each other English, practiced coding together, prepared for an uncertain future. The American administrators approved small kindnesses, a library of technical books, a corner for letter writing, permission to sing Russian folk songs in the evenings. It was fragile and temporary and built on uncertainty, but for the first time in years, it felt like peace. The work created unexpected bonds. Soviet engineers who had never collaborated with foreigners now debugged code alongside American programmers who had never met a Russian. Language barriers fell away in the universal syntax of programming languages. A syntax error looks the same in any accent. The facilities became strange hybrids, neither prison nor workplace, something in between. Security remained tight. Guards patrol perimeters. Roll calls happened twice daily. But within those boundaries, something resembling normal life emerged. Chess tournaments in recreation halls. Volleyball games on weekends. English classes taught by volunteers from nearby towns. Some American programmers brought their families to company picnics, introduced their children to the Soviet engineers they worked with daily. Kids do not understand Cold War politics. They just see adults working together, laughing together, being human together. Those children would grow up remembering that enemies could become friends, that ideology mattered less than character, that the world was more complicated than any propaganda suggested. The gardens some detainees planted became symbols of hope. Tomatoes and herbs growing in California soil tended by Russian hands. Small green things that did not care about politics, that just grew toward the sun like everything alive does. Winter 1984 brought news that changed everything. Diplomatic negotiations accelerated. Repatriation timelines moved forward. The engineers knew their time in America was ending. Some felt relief, eager to return despite the uncertainties. Others felt dread, having seen too much, learned too much, to go back unchanged. Viktor Petrov received a letter from his brother in Moscow. The words were careful, coded in ways only family would understand. "Things are difficult here. We manage. Come home when you can." Between the lines, Petrov read desperation. Food shortages, economic stagnation, political tension. His brother was telling him to stay away if possible, to come home only if forced. But forced was exactly what would happen. The final months became bittersweet. Every project completion felt like a goodbye. Every shared meal carried extra weight. The American programmers knew their Soviet colleagues were leaving. Some tried to help, writing reference letters that would mean nothing back in the USSR, giving gifts that might be confiscated at the border, teaching extra skills in hope they would prove useful somehow. Michael Chun spent his own money to buy technical manuals for his team, banned books in the Soviet Union, contraband knowledge. He packaged them carefully, showed the engineers how to hide them in their belongings. If they ask, "You found these in California libraries," he said. Learn from them. Teach others. Keep the knowledge alive. The engineers understood what he was really saying. Take back the truth. Show them another way is possible. Become ambassadors of what you have seen. The gardens they had planted were in full bloom now. Ironic timing. Beautiful things growing just as their gardeners prepare to leave. The departure day arrived in spring 1985. Buses lined up outside facility Sunnyvale. The engineers packed their few belongings, the technical manuals hidden carefully among clothes, the letters from American friends folded into pockets. Some cried openly. Others maintained stoic faces that fooled no one. Michael Chun and his team came to see them off. Company policy prohibited fraternization, but Chun ignored it. He shook every hand, embraced several engineers, promised to write though he knew letters might never arrive. Linda Martinez brought food for their journey, sandwiches and fruit packed with the same generous portions she had always given. Pete, the gas station attendant, showed up, found Anton Fedorov in the crowd, hugged him like a son. Other American colleagues came too, programmers and managers and administrative staff, people who had worked beside these Soviets for 3 years. The goodbyes stretched on until officials insisted the buses must leave. Viktor Petrov was the last aboard. He turned back one final time, looked at the facility that had been prison and workplace and home, at the Americans who had been enemies and became friends. He raised his hand in farewell. A dozen hands raised back. The buses pulled away. Through the rear windows, the engineers watched Silicon Valley disappear. Office parks and suburbs and highways, the landscape of abundance they were leaving behind. Sergei Volkov stared at his hands, calloused now from typing instead of manual labor, hands that had built software instead of weapons. He wondered what he would build back home, if anything, if there would be resources or equipment or hope. The ship crossing the Atlantic felt like traveling backward through time. From abundance to scarcity, from freedom to control, from possibility to limitation. The engineers gathered on deck, watched America fade behind them, wondered what waited ahead. They arrived in a Soviet Union visibly declining. Empty shelves, longer lines, dimmer lights. The contrast with California was absolute. But they carried something that could not be confiscated at customs, could not be suppressed by officials. They carried knowledge of another way, proof that prosperity did not require oppression, that strength did not demand cruelty. Some faced suspicion upon return. Why were you treated well? What did you tell them? What did you learn? The interrogations were inevitable. But the engineers had rehearsed their answers, kept their stories simple, mentioned only work and basic conditions. They did not speak of friendships, of handshakes, of kindness. Those memories they kept private, protected, sacred. The technical manuals they had smuggled became underground treasures, passed between trusted colleagues, copied by hand when necessary, seeds of knowledge planted in hostile soil. The methods they had learned in Silicon Valley, they adapted and taught quietly. Small improvements, incremental changes, nothing dramatic enough to draw attention. Within 5 years, the Soviet system collapsed. The engineers who had seen America understood why. They had witnessed the alternative, lived inside abundance, experienced what happened when human potential was unleashed instead of controlled. When the borders finally opened, when immigration became possible, hundreds of former detainees returned to America legally. Viktor Petrov among them. Michael Chun met him at the airport again. Same handshake, same smile, different world. "Welcome home," Chun said. Petrov realized it was true. This was home now.